All right, ladies and gentlemen, Keith Johnson here. Today I'm going to be sharing some documents with you that were received from the Lake County, Florida Sheriff's Department pursuant to a Freedom of Information Act request. So these are public records that I will be sharing with you, and they concern a police report filed last year by the hoaxer's fearless leader, Wolfgang Halbig, against a Sandy Hook parent, accusing this parent of harassment. Now, we're going to examine these documents and show that the charges have no merit and should be considered a false police report. But first, a little background. Now, the Sandy Hook parent I'm referring to is Lenny Pozner, whose son Noah was the youngest child murdered at the Sandy Hook Elementary School on December 14, 2012. And I personally had the honor of meeting Lenny for the first time last year in the summer of 2014. He was kind enough to allow me to interview him for this article that I wrote for American Free Press. And to date, Lenny is perhaps the only parent who's been willing to address the various conspiracy theories about the tragedy that have been circulating on the internet. Unfortunately, his efforts have been largely met with hostility by the vast majority of Sandy Hook conspiracy theorists, people whom we commonly refer to as hoaxers, including the man whom we will be discussing today, Wolfgang Halbig, who is undoubtedly the most visible, aggressive, and well-funded. Wolfgang, of course, proudly counts himself among those who claim that there is no proof that children were killed during this massacre, and has even gone so far as to suggest that they never even existed. So, in an effort to counter this falsehood, Lenny publicly released what would otherwise be considered private documents concerning his murdered son, his birth certificate, his kindergarten report card from the Sandy Hook Elementary School, his death certificate, which you see before you here, and even the first page of an investigative report that was filed by the Office of the Chief Medical Examiner. And although these documents are exempt from disclosure under Connecticut's Freedom of Information Act, Lenny hoped that their release would help satisfy hoaxers that were demanding, among other things, evidence of Noah's existence, proof of his death, and details about the emergency response and other things like that. Unfortunately, Lenny's measure of good faith wasn't enough to satisfy these irrational Sandy Hook hoaxers, chief among them disgraced college professor Jim Fetzer, along with this creature, Dr. Eowyn, who immediately dismissed the documents posted by Lenny as fakes. Of course, just like all hoaxer quote unquote research, these unqualified armchair detectives were unable to support their claim with even a shred of factual evidence. Okay, that brings us now to Wolfgang Halbig and this alleged incident, which occurred in late May of 2014, last year. And I'm very familiar with what happened because I spoke with Lenny personally about this, and as a result, made this blog post, Halbig Hides from the Truth. And if you'd like to read it for yourself, you can do so by visiting my blog, Sandy Hook Stalkers. I'm not going to read through this whole thing. I'm just going to give you an abridged version. It basically boils down to this. You see, Lenny has ties, both personal and professional, in Florida, the same state where Wolfgang Halbig resides. He was planning a personal and business trip to Florida and was hoping to work in a visit with Wolfgang Halbig because he wanted to resolve all of these rumors that were circulating, rumors that were generated by people like Jim Fetzer, who claimed that these documents were fake. And he wanted to set the record straight and was hoping that Wolfgang Halbig would meet with him and look at Noah's physical death certificate and see for himself that they were authentic. So to set this up, Lenny called Halbig or attempted to reach him a few days before driving down to Florida, but found that his voice mailbox was full. And since he was unsuccessful in reaching Halbig by phone, he contacted one of Halbig's associates, a woman who had been in communication with Lenny in the past. And Lenny asked her if he could relay the message that he'd like to arrange a meeting. Shortly thereafter, this individual emailed Lenny and simply told him that Wolfgang didn't want to speak with him. Okay? So, let it be known that Lenny never spoke to Wolfgang Halbig, nor did he make any attempt at all to contact him at his residence. However, on May 31st, 2014, Wolfgang Halbig posted this message on his now defunct Sandy Hook Justice Facebook page. You would not believe who is at my front gate of a gated community in Sorrento, Florida, trying to get in to see me. Lenny Pozner, a parent who supposedly died on December 14, 2012 at Sandy Hook. Did you read that? Why would he travel from Sandy Hook to Florida and then to my gated community? If I called him or his wife, Veronica, I would be arrested for harassment by the Connecticut State Police. All right. Now, it should be noted, folks, that this announcement on this public forum, this Facebook page, came a day after Wolfgang Halbig told the Lake County Sheriff's Office that Lenny was at his gate. This is one of the many glaring inconsistencies in Wolfgang's account of the alleged incident, and we're going to prove that by looking at some of these documents. Just for reference, this is the Florida statute, which deals with harassing telephone calls. So you read along here as we review these documents and determine for yourself whether or not it meets the criteria of a harassing phone call. For instance, the person receiving the call should have a reasonable expectation of privacy, which is an interesting proposition considering that Wolfgang Halbig has posted his phone number and address all over the place and has invited people to call and even visit his home. We'll provide proof of that later. During such call, the individual who made the call makes a comment, request, suggestion, or proposal which is obscene, lewd, lascivious, filthy, vulgar, or indecent. And the call, the language is intended to offend, annoy, abuse, threaten, or harass any person at the called number. It continues on here. Read along. Even continues on this page. You tell me, after we review these documents, if the report by Wolfgang Halbig has any merit whatsoever. And of course, if so, the person making that call would be guilty of a misdemeanor, punishable as provided in this section. Okay, I'm going to read these off to you in chronological order. This first one came in May 30th, 2014, 7:05 p.m. These are comments on a computer-assisted dispatch log. It says here, complainant, who is Wolfgang Halbig, advises that he's been receiving emails, calls, and texts from a Lenny Pozner, who is a parent of a child that passed in the Sandy Hook shooting. Emails just say, call me. No threats are being made. Lenny, according to this, or according to Halbig, tried to come to his house last night, but the security guard wouldn't let him through. Now, this is a bald-faced lie, ladies and gentlemen. No security guard at Wolfgang Halbig's gated community ever came in contact with Lenny Pozner. This is a complete fabrication. Complainant, again, meaning Wolfgang Halbig, advises that he doesn't know this male, Lenny, or anything about him. Unknown how he got his address or phone number. Isn't that something? Unknown how he got his address or phone number. Wolfgang Halbig plasters his phone number and address all over the place and comments on websites, in emails that he publishes on his Facebook page. What a liar. Halbig concerned that he doesn't know this male, right? He doesn't know who Lenny Pozner is and doesn't know how he got any of his information. Unknown what he could do next. Okay. All right, the following day on May 31st, we have this entry. per 1570, meaning the deputy who responded to the call. Subject, that being Halbig, is S20. S20 meaning mentally ill or mentally unstable. So Wolfgang Halbig is mentally unstable. Halbig stated numerous times that he is retired Florida Highway Patrol and wanted to know why Lake County Sheriff's Office was harassing him in reference to his Connecticut Freedom of Information Act request. Halbig went on to say that the father of one of the victims came to his house, that father being Lenny Pozner. And Halbig wanted to know why Lenny won't be arrested. Well, the deputy told Halbig, according to what he was able to ascertain from the lack of evidence that was provided by Halbig, that Lenny was not threatening him. As a result, Halbig was extremely upset that Lenny showed up at his house, and the deputy advised Halbig multiple times that this will be a S-42 issue, meaning it's a civil issue at this point. It's not a criminal case that we can pursue. If you want to go after Lenny Pozner, you have to take it up in a civil court. So Halbig was advised to seek civil representation and pursue it in that manner against this parent, Lenny Pozner, if he wanted to pursue this any further. The complainant, being Halbig, then advised that Lake County Sheriff's Office is not willing to help him and no longer required their assistance. So this matter was discontinued. Okay, now before we continue, remember the Lake County Sheriff's Office referred to Halbig as an S20. What does S20 mean? Well, if we consult the Lake County Sheriff's Office website and scroll down here to signals, S being the designation for signal, and then scroll down here to 20, S20, mentally ill person, homicidal or suicidal. Interesting. Okay, so a few days go by, and on June 3rd, 2014, Halbig calls the Sheriff's Department, and he wants to file a report of harassment against Lenny Pozner, and he wants a deputy to respond to his residence and take this report in person. Now, keep in mind, it's already been established that there has been no harassment. There has been no communication between Wolfgang Halbig and Lenny Pozner. They haven't spoken. There's been absolutely no evidence of harassment, but Halbig nevertheless wants to file a report. Received this call from the attorney of Halbig, who stated that Halbig attempted to file a report a couple days ago, but deputies refused to come to his house to take a report. Well, eventually Halbig's persistence did pay off, because Lake County Sheriff did eventually send a deputy out to file a report, even though there was no evidence to substantiate the claim that Lenny Pozner was making harassing phone calls. Nevertheless, a deputy was sent out and filed this report on June 3rd. I responded to Halbig's location in reference to harassing communications. Mr. Halbig advised that during the end of May, he traveled to Newtown, Connecticut in reference to obtaining answers about the Sandy Hook school massacre investigation. He advised that while still in Connecticut, he received an email from a subject identifying himself as the suspect, Lenny Pozner, who reportedly lost a child to the shooting. He advised that he did not respond but returned to Florida on the night of the 29th. Halbig advised that on Friday, the 30th, he received a telephone call from Kelly Watt, a notorious lying Sandy Hook hoax conspiracy theorist, advising that Mr. Pozner was at the community gate wanting to be let in. A complete lie. Okay, Mr. Pozner was never at the community gate wanting to get in. This is a lie that is being told either by Mr. Halbig, or he is repeating a lie told to him by Kelly Watt. Nevertheless, Halbig advised that Kelly Watt described the entrance as reportedly told to her by the suspect. Halbig advised that, again, he did not meet with Mr. Pozner and has since received count them, two telephone calls, which he believes are from Mr. Pozner. In other words, he doesn't know for sure, but he thinks they're from Mr. Pozner, these two phone calls. He advised at this time he is unable to locate a phone number that Mr. Pozner called from, and Mr. Pozner does not leave a message. Now think about that for a minute, folks. He thinks these two phone calls, he believes these two phone calls came from Mr. Pozner, but he doesn't have a phone number that would connect that phone call to Mr. Pozner, and Mr. Pozner does not leave a message. Okay. Mr. Halbig provided a copy of the page from his email stating it is from the suspect, Mr. Pozner, and that Mr. Pozner wants to speak with the victim. So Mr. Halbig alleges to be the victim of an email request from Mr. Pozner to meet with him. Wow. There is no email or IP address visible on the page. Mr. Halbig completed a sworn affidavit with intent to prosecute and was issued a victim's rights sheet. A sworn affidavit with intent to prosecute against Mr. Pozner for leaving an email requesting to meet with him, and a phone call that Mr. Halbig believes was generated from Mr. Pozner where no message was left. Okay? That's the basis of this police report. Nothing further. Okay, now, before I forget, let's go ahead and address this claim by Wolfgang Halbig, where he tells the Lake County Sheriff's Office that he has no idea how Lenny could have possibly obtained his address and telephone number. Well, anyone who has followed Wolfgang Halbig knows that he prolifically spreads his telephone number and address to everyone. And I'm talking about when he makes comments on web pages for even local news stations, on his website, on Facebook pages. His address and phone number are prominently displayed, including here, Godlike Productions. And I'm telling you, folks, you can't get any more extreme than Godlike Productions for conspiracy theories. Let's scroll down here, and they have this post, which they mirror from Wolfgang Halbig's own sandyhookjustice.com website. This email was addressed to Sergeant David Culgren of the Newtown Police Department. And if you scroll down here, he invites Sergeant Culgren to his home. He says, I invite you to my home. And he gives his address in Sorrento, Florida, to show you personally your mistakes that will get you in serious trouble unless you and your helpers have immunity from prosecution in the Sandy Hook shooting illusion. And if you scroll down a little further, you'll even find his phone number prominently displayed. He does this all the time in interviews and debates that I have had personally with Wolfgang Halbig. He has invited me over to his residence. C.W. Wade can also attest to this. He was also invited to Wolfgang Halbig's residence. So this claim that he is totally clueless as to how Lenny Pozner could have gotten his address is totally bogus, just like this police report that he filed with the Sheriff's Department. And if you want a more recent example, here's one from October 6th on his Twitter account. He sent this out to Sean Hannity. Allow me on your show to show you the truth about Sandy Hook. If you are a true patriot, come to my home and I will show you. He sent this out not only to Sean Hannity, but I think even the President of the United States. So he's constantly doing this, inviting people over to his residence. Okay, well, here's that sworn affidavit written in Wolfgang Halbig's own handwriting here. Now, the original document included his date of birth and driver's license number and phone numbers. I chose to block that all out for purposes of my video. But what I would like you to take particular note of is this backward slant, or this left-handed slant in Wolfgang Halbig's handwriting. That's significant, folks, and we're going to address that later. But first, let's take a look at what he has to say here. I'll read this off the best I can. On May 30th, 2014, was notified by Kelly Watt via phone that a man named Lenny Pozner, father of Noah Pozner, who was shot and killed at Sandy Hook Elementary School on December 14th, 2012, was at my back gate. 3R46, not sure what that says, but back gate, he says here. Elsewhere, he's said that Lenny Pozner was at his front gate. So make up your mind. Anyway, Kelly, was concerned for my safety and just gave me notice that he is trying to get to my house. He has emailed me. He has called me with me not returning messages. I notified the Lake County sheriffs of that and requesting them to take a report in the event this escalates. I do not wish to see this parent on my premises. Okay, well, that's the extent of it. Except for this box here. Intent to prosecute, they ask? Oh, yes, he says. Wolfgang's got that box checked, yes. By all means, throw that son of a bitch in jail for daring to call me on a phone number that I have plastered all over the place. Yes, throw this parent in jail for sending this public figure an email requesting to meet with him. Oh, Lord have mercy. And if we scroll down here, we can see that email. This one single email, I might add. This is the only email that was received by Wolfgang Halbig from Lenny Pozner on May 28, 2014. And that email reads, I would like to speak to you on the phone. Len Pozner, father of Noah Pozner. Wait a minute. I must have missed something here. I would like to speak to you on the phone. That's it? That's all this email says? Where's the harassment? Where are the threats? What caused Wolfgang Halbig to fear for his safety to the extent where he would make multiple calls to the sheriff's department demanding that a report be taken, demanding that Leonard Pozner be taken into custody for harassment? Where is the grounds for that accusation, ladies and gentlemen? Yes, despite what Halbig has said, that he's received texts and emails and telephone calls, well, as far as emails are concerned, this is it. This is the email that set this whole thing in motion. Okay, now before we close out here, folks, let me do a little bit of analysis on Wolfgang Halbig's left-slanted writing. This is an excerpt from a book written by Alok Kumar entitled Handwriting Speaks, Handwriting Analysis Made Easy. And they talk specifically about people like Wolfgang Halbig, pronounced left slant. Here is the effect of recline which becomes pronounced. Such writers are better left to themselves as they dislike socializing. They are defensive, cold, and self-absorbed. Apart from feeling insecure, they are also introverts and would normally try to evade reality. It has been seen that such people live in some kind of fear of the future. Well, that's pronounced left slant. What we saw is an example of extreme left slant with Wolfgang Halbig. Nothing in extreme is good. Neither extreme left slant nor extreme right slant. Writers of such types of handwriting can be characterized as cynical, egocentric, mentally ill, unhappy, and withdrawn. Such people always live in fear of the future. They love to be alone, withdrawn, and feel dislikable. They find difficulty in communicating and tend to be oversensitive. Their sensitivity would make them withdraw in a shell rather than becoming explosive, which normally happens with an extreme right slant. They are suspicious of others and tend to be arrogant. All in all, they do not make a likable personality. A graph therapist would certainly be of great help in making a better person out of them. Well, folks, I hate to say this, but I think that Wolfgang Halbig is a lost cause. So I guess in conclusion, the moral of the story here is don't take the bait. Wolfgang Halbig will try to lure you in by throwing out his address and telephone number. But if you take him up on his offer to call him or stop by his house, he will more than likely call the police if he considers you to be an adversary. And finally, I'm going to leave you by reading an excerpt from my blog post, How Big Hides from the Truth, a blog post that is more than a year old. I'm going to scroll down to the last few paragraphs. I think they're as relevant today as they were back then. One would think that those leading the investigation of this alleged hoax would jump at an opportunity to pick the brain of a Sandy Hook parent who is not only volunteering to answer your questions, but is also willing to do so in person and on your own turf. I'm going to skip back a paragraph to read this. Remember, this is the same Wolfgang Halbig who has been demanding that parents, first responders, and anyone else connected to the Sandy Hook Elementary School massacre be dragged into court to face grueling depositions. But of course, Wolfgang Halbig is not an investigator. He's a con man. Each day, this fraudster brings nothing new to the table, but takes in large sums of cash. As of this writing, Halbig has raised more than $23,000 on his GoFundMe account, and God knows how many thousands from other sources like PayPal, mail orders, cash, checks, etc., etc. $23,000, ladies and gentlemen, was what he collected last year when I wrote this blog post. It's more than doubled since then. Continuing on. By now, it should be glaringly obvious to any rational person that there is no quote-unquote fact-finding mission, and certainly no quote-unquote quest for truth on the Wolfgang Halbig agenda. This isn't about getting answers. It's about getting money. Hopefully, this game will end soon, and devastated parents like Lenny Pozner will have an opportunity to continue healing without the vultures constantly circling over their heads. Folks, I wrote this a year ago, and the game is still continuing. And parents like Lenny Pozner are still trying to heal, but the vultures are still constantly circling over their heads.